them on.
It's a pretty lengthy report.
I mean, it's 62 pages,
Yeah.
but a lot of them are blank slides.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Craig, weren't you supposed to bring dinner for everybody?
Good thing I'm on a diet.
Perfect.
Zach, we're all good? All right. So we have Mark and Nick from MD Roffers Consulting. They have worked on our behalf for the last several months to prepare our population study that we've anxiously been waiting for. So we are live streaming this right now, so I got to actually text some people, let them know that we have this here, and we'll share this. It'll be, obviously, like any board meeting, it'll be available to go back and take a look at. So I'm not going to say anything else. I'll turn it over to Mark and to Nick.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much, committee, for having us here tonight. My name, again, is Mark Roffers. Not Mark, just one Mark. And Nick and I worked on these projections for you. We're happy to deliver them. And without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to Nick and have him introduce himself and lead the presentation. Then we'll be interested in any questions or comments you may have. Can we get the presentation up in presentation mode, or is this
Let's
a
see.
PDF?
Oh, it looks like it works.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Yep, should work for you there.
Perfect. All right. Seems like this is working too. All right. Thanks for having us over, guys. My name is Nick Johnson. I'm an assistant planner with MD Roffers Consulting. As Mark mentioned, we've been working on these projections for you all over the last several months, since about last November. So we're excited to present them to you and show you our findings. So kind of an organization, how the presentation is going to be organized. So first we'll just go over the purpose of our effort, why we're doing what we did, and then go over some recent trends, which will provide a good kind of baseline knowledge for you all to know what happened over the last decade or so, and which was pretty much a baseline of our projections. Then we'll go through our projection methodology, and then share our results of our projections. So we'll share our results compared to current school building capacities. Then we'll also do a what-if scenario with having sixth graders shifted from the elementary school, where they currently are, to the middle school, and how that would affect our projections and our capacities. We are finishing up our detailed community growth and projections report, which is a pretty hefty 60 to 70 page report that should be finished probably by the end of this week or next week, which will have a lot more detailed information for you guys that I won't fully go over in this presentation.
Highlights only then.
Highlights, right, there we go.
Craig's bedtime is
No,
20 minutes ago.
I could do this all night, man. This is great.
So the purpose of our effort, really to assist you all with your long-range school facility planning effort that's been underway. What we did is we are understanding the impact of planned residential development and demographic changes on student enrollment. So you all are probably aware of a lot of the new housing that's going up in the district, particularly north of the high school, and wondering how that might affect enrollment at your guys' schools over the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years or so. We also look at how demographic changes might affect future student enrollment. So the birth rate has been decreasing, what that means for you guys and what that means for your district, among other demographic changes that we'll touch base on. We share our housing and enrollment projections by neighborhood, as well as by grade group. So for your elementary grade group, your middle school and your high school grade group, as well as by current elementary attendance areas. We then compare our enrollment projections with current school capacities, and then also determine how that what-if scenario with that sixth grade shift to middle school would affect our capacities. Looking at recent trends, enrollment has slightly increased over the last decade or so. From the 2011 to 2021 academic years, enrollment increased by about 250 students A good portion of that increase was due to the start of 4K programming in the 2015 academic year, but there were also some minor increases in the 5K to 6th grade level as well. The middle school and high school, grades 7 to 8 and 9 through 12, enrollment remained fairly steady, fairly stable over the last decade. The village of Mukwonago is increasing in population and increasing pretty significantly over the last couple decades by about 2,000 residents since the year 2000. The town of Mukwonago and village of Vernon experienced some population increases from 2000 to 2010, but actually decreased slightly in enrollment over the last decade. Those are the 3 largest municipalities in your district. There are others, but they are quite a bit smaller.
This is actually total population, which includes kids plus adults.
Correct, yep. And most of those increases that we've seen, and this is for the Mukwonago Area School District as a whole, most of those increases that we've seen are actually in the older age ranges, so the baby boomer age range, so about 60 and older, with the millennial age range and the children age range, so age 0 to 19, and then millennials age 25 to 44. Those remaining fairly steady or slightly decreasing over the last decade. Births have been increasing over the last decade in the Mukwonago Area School District. They increased by about 12% from 2010 to 2020. That was followed then by a decrease of about 20% from 2020 to 2021, which we're also projecting those lower numbers to remain in the year 2022, just due to economic uncertainty due to the pandemic. A lot of families not necessarily have forgone having children, they've just delayed it by a couple of years due to issues with the pandemic and economic uncertainty.
Nick, can you just stay on that point for a quick second? So when that sudden drop in birth rate occurs, what that means for us when those children become school aged 5 years, 6 years from now, what do we think will happen because of that?
Yeah, we'll likely see those class sizes be notably smaller than surrounding class sizes, so by about 30 or so students.
But that'll be in a temporary kind of one-time sense.
Yeah, and then they'll just track through the grade groups over time.
Correct, yep.
So 5 years or so from now, we'll have a decrease of sorts because of this drop-off in birth rate, but that's just one time in nature, just something to put in the back of our minds if you're still on the school board in another 5 or 6 years.
And we did factor that into our projections as well. So that's something that we did take into consideration and are included. And I'll touch base on that when we get to the projections.
And I doubt all of that 20% was attributed to the pandemic. You see there's a 2014 to 2015 blip too. It's just sort of the random chance of events sometimes that plays in.
Housing construction has been increasing in the district over the last few years. The village of Mukwonago permitted about 15 to 20 new single-family homes per year in the end of the 2010s. In 2021, for the first 10 months or so, the village permitted about 30 new single-family homes, so quite a few more. And we do expect that increase to continue through 2022 and beyond as well, given the number of recent approved and proposed developments in the village and town of Mukwonago. Who's moving into these new single-family homes that are going up around the village and around the district? We found that they're really attracting families, many of which have children. We performed, along with help from district staff, a new homeowner survey. We sent about 200 surveys to homes that were built from 2018 to 2020 and received, I think, about 80 or 90 of those back. We found that about 3 out of 4 new households moved from outside of the district. So we've worked with several dozen districts across the state of Wisconsin, and that's one of the highest that we've seen from people moving outside of the district. So they're moving from elsewhere in southeastern Wisconsin, and oftentimes bringing with them children.
We call it a destination district, Nick.
Yeah,
We really do.
there you go.
Greg, I think that really validates that when we say that.
Yep,
There it is.
yep.
Sure does. We also compared student addresses to newer home permits. We found that each new single-family home generates about 0.85 students for the district. And then from the survey as well, we found that there was about 0.56 students generated per new single-family home. So a little bit lower than when we compared student address data to newer home permits. But we did find that there were there are quite a few children aged 0 to 4 in a lot of these new single-family homes. So those are students that in a few years will be entering the school district and be in 4K, 5K elementary school. We did find that the ratios were the highest in the town of Mukwonago, which we attributed to they tend to be larger homes, tend to be more family-friendly, larger lots. There are also 2 elementary schools in the town of Mukwonago, so it just makes it more of a family-friendly area within your district. There's other new housing going up in the district, specifically in the village of Mukwonago. New apartments, new townhomes, new condominiums. They've typically been marketed towards families and individuals that just typically don't have children. So they are young professionals, childless couples, empty nesters, seniors. They're often only 1 to 2 bedroom units, have more adult-focused amenities, so think like gyms instead of playgrounds, and tend to have higher rents. We did analyze student per housing unit ratios for some recently built apartments. Found that some of them had somewhat higher ratios, like the Edgewood Village apartments had 0.13 students per unit, but a lot of them, and especially some of the newer ones, like the Point apartments, Phantom Woods Estates, had really no kids.
Is there up by Walmart, are they gonna build that big? That's a goal?
You'll see more about that in a
Oh, I'm
little
sorry.
bit. Mhm.
No, that's great. But we found in our analysis that it takes about 25 to 30 new multiple family units just to generate 1 student for the district. So a large apartment building of maybe 100, 200 units typically generate about a half a dozen kids for the district. So not as many students as one might think. We also looked at recent home sales data. So these are recent home sales of single family homes throughout the district. The darker colors just show where there are greater numbers of home sales versus other areas. But we found that a lot of these home sales aren't necessarily translating to student increases. There are some neighborhoods where the home sales seem like they did increase the number of students, but most neighborhoods that had significant numbers of home sales, the student population remained fairly stable or even decreased slightly over the last decade.
So this is in contrast to new houses where we, again, anywhere from 0.6 to 0.9 kids for your district per new house built. For existing houses, those ratios aren't nearly as high. So what's that's telling us is when folks do come and buy existing houses, they less frequently come with children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems like our subdivision's turning over, the older folks are leaving and where new families are coming in. I mean, we've noticed that for
Yep.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
So when are you moving out?
Yeah,
So a
exactly.
family can move in, Craig.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
And we certainly, and Nick will explain this, we track that. It's not as if it doesn't happen, and that generational turnover is important.
Great, now getting into our projection methodology. So we first divided the school district into 66 different neighborhoods, which really became the basis for our entire project, our data collection, our analysis, our housing and student projections. These weren't drawn randomly. There's a rhyme and reason to them. We used locally understood neighborhoods as well as subdivisions, major roads and highways as boundaries between these neighborhoods. Looked at municipal boundaries, kept municipal boundaries mostly within the neighborhood boundaries, as well as planned growth areas of each municipality, and then made sure that neighborhoods did not cross elementary school attendance areas, as that allows us to do projections for each school. This is map 2 in our report, one of several maps you'll see tonight, one of several maps that are in our report. This shows those 66 neighborhoods. Neighborhood 1 is in the northwest corner of the district, and neighborhood 66 is in the northeast corner of the district. The different colors show the different elementary school attendance areas as of the 21-22 academic year. Our methodology for housing unit projections, so we estimated the current number of housing units in each neighborhood. So that was of November of last year. And then we projected 2023, 25, 2030, and 2035 housing units in each neighborhood. We did that by looking at municipal comprehensive plans. So for the Village of Mukwonago, Village of Vernon, Village of Big Bend. We also looked at recent or pending subdivisions that municipal planners shared with us. We spoke with and interviewed several municipal planners from most of the municipalities, spoke to several residential developers, local realtors that just knew the housing market, knew which areas would pop next, or areas that they were interested in developing. We looked at the rate and the mix of housing growth in each neighborhood. So as we kind of touched base on, 100 single-family homes will generate a lot more students than 100 multiple-family units. And then we had a reality check, just comparing our housing projections by recent building permit activity, but also by household projections that the state produces, and then sending our projections to each municipality to just get their review of it. You probably can't read this unless you are looking on your computers, but this is a screenshot of a portion of our model, just showing a couple neighborhoods here, what subdivisions exist there, what we propose is going to develop there, the timing of the development, the rate of it, and then the right columns show our projection periods and the number of housing units that we project there. Our enrollment projections rely heavily on our housing unit projections, so we determine our current student per housing unit ratios for each grade group in each neighborhood. Then we project unique 2023, 25, 30, and 35 student per housing unit ratios for each grade group in each neighborhood. And we do this by aging current students through the school system. So we know if there's 50 elementary school students in one neighborhood right now, there will probably be 50 middle school and high school students there about 5-10 years from now. We also project turnover by subdivision ages. So we know that once a neighborhood is built with new single-family homes, it takes about 30-ish years or so for those homes to turn over to new families. So the original homeowners buy the home when it's new, raise their kids there. When they're empty nesters, they typically sell it after 30 years to a new family that is typically younger and either has kids or plans to have kids. We look at recent home sales data, factor in the impact of new housing. We consider the housing mixture of different types of new housing. And then we also use the results of the new homeowner survey into our projections as well. Then we multiply our housing units by our projected student per housing unit ratios. That gives us our enrollment projections for each projection period. Screenshot of our model. This is for grades 5K to 5, showing how those student per housing unit ratios can change in a neighborhood. And that's based on those new housing units, turnover of existing housing units, as well as other demographic changes that we've incorporated into our model. Some neighborhoods have increasing ratios, some have them remaining fairly steady over the projection period, and some have them decreasing. All right, getting to the good stuff. So our housing projections. So we anticipate that the district will become an even more popular location for new housing development over the next 14, 15 years or so, especially than it had over the last 10 years. So we project almost 2,000 new housing units in the district by 2035. That equates to about 140 new units per year, which is greater than the 70 to 90 that we've seen since about 2010. Really in large part because we expect about half of those new units will not be single-family homes, so will be multiple family units of some type. Looking at the distribution of our housing projections, the lion's share of new housing we project will be in the village of Mukwonago, about 70% of those new housing units, with about 11% in the town of Mukwonago and 7% in the village of Big Bend. Looking at elementary attendance area, about a third will be in the Clarendon Avenue elementary attendance area, about a quarter in the Section elementary attendance area, and then 9% in the Big Bend elementary attendance area. Rolling Hills and Prairie View are the two elementary attendance areas we project the least amount of new housing in. Looking specifically at the village of Mukwonago, projected housing is really focused at the village's northern edge, as well as the southeastern edge near the Highway 83, Interstate 43 interchange. We project Chapman Farms, so that's the subdivision just north of the high school. We project that to be built out by 2030, with another subdivision to its north and or west by 2035. Miners Estates is just west of the high school, where we project additional phase development to continue through 2035. And then there's a large vacant piece of land near St. James Catholic Church that we project to pop before the 2030s, with new single-family homes and then single-family and multiple-family homes through the 2030s. And this is what you had touched base on before, the Maple Center Apartments. This is a large apartment development that has been proposed with 670 units spread across 10 different buildings. So there's about 50 to 70 units in each building. One or two of the buildings will be set aside for seniors. About half of the total units will be one bedroom. The other half will be 2 to 3 bedroom, with about 100 to 120 of those units being 3-bedroom units. So we think that this development could be more popular with families with children than other apartments that we've seen recently built in the village of Mukwonago. And of our projected 2,000 or so units through 2035, a third are in this one development alone.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time there, Nick? That last statement?
Yeah, so of our, about the 2,000 projected units in the district, by 2035, a third of those are in Maple Center alone.
So you can really see that, you know, those 140 units per year that we're projecting, you know, whatever you want to figure it out, that third, 100 of them, or 40 of them or so per year on average are via this project.
You want water?
I'm good, thank you. Well, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. This is another one of the, a map. So this is a heat map showing projected housing unit growth in the district. The hotter the colors, so the reds and orange are where more housing units are projected in the district. This is one of several maps you'll see tonight. This just really shows that focus of housing development on that northern tier and southeastern corner of the village of Mukwonago. Looking at the town of Mukwonago, there's a large vacant area west of Section Elementary School that we project will develop between 2025 and 2035, with smaller rural divisions expected in other locations in the town, but mostly near County Roads E and County Roads EE. We don't expect a lot of new housing east of Highway 83 or south of County Road NN in the town, really because these areas have a lot of environmental constraints. They're fairly wet. There's creeks and rivers running through them, so just aren't as developable as other areas. In the map showing where we expect new housing units in the town, really by County Road EE and County Road E. Looking at eastern municipalities in the district, we project new housing in the southern portion of the village of Big Bend through the next few years, so through 2025, and then kind of new housing shifting northward in the village, so moving into central portions of the village by 2025 to 2035, and then northern portions north of Interstate 43 after 2030 and beyond. In the village of Vernon, we project new housing really in the northwestern portion of the village, near and along Oakdale Drive. The southern half of the village of Vernon also has some environmental constraints and other issues. We do assume a continued lack of public utilities in this area, so that will limit growth and also limit density. So there's no public sewer, no public water in these areas, which means that lot sizes are typically 1, 2, 3 acre lots. You don't see the development density like you do in the subdivisions north of the high school. Similar in western parts of the Mukwonago Area School District, there are also lack of utilities here, so there's just lack of sewer, and then there's water system capacity issues that may limit the density as well. So we expect not as much new housing as in other parts, but we do expect some new housing near Broadlands Golf Club and near Prairie View Elementary in the village of North Prairie, and then north of Eagle Spring Lake in the town of Eagle.
So again, though, 70% of our projected new housing units are not in these places, but instead in the village, either in the new subdivisions on the north side that are currently developing or projected, or the new multiple family housing that we're projecting on the south side as part of that Maple Center development, predominantly.
So what happens in existing housing also has a major impact on future enrollment. About 86% of our projected 2035 homes are already built, so they're already on the ground. But we just project that future housing in all forms will not have as many students as it did in the past, really due to more multiple family housing and also more housing filled with empty nesters. So older folks tend to stay in their homes longer than they used to, as well as a lot of new housing in single family and multiple family forms being specifically geared to seniors. There's also shifts in household formation with my generation, the millennial generation. We're getting married later, having kids later. I actually just have a 6-month-old daughter, so she's amazing, but I'm in my early to mid-30s now, so
He's
we waited.
super old.
Yes.
Super old.
So we waited till later to have kids instead of, previous generations, which may have had them in their mid-20s to late 20s. So that's causing just future housing to not have as many students as new housing did in the past. And as a result, most every school district and attendance area also requires a fair amount of new housing growth and also specifically single-family housing growth, really to just simply maintain student enrollment. In districts that aren't able to have that single-family housing growth really are just decreasing in enrollment overall. All right, getting to the good stuff, student enrollment projections under our current grade group configuration. So this section will show our projections with sixth graders still in the elementary schools. So over the next 14 years or so, we project an increase of about 355 resident 4K to 12 students in district schools, an average increase of about 25 new resident students per year. So again, this is only resident students. This figure doesn't include open enroll in. An open enroll out and private school enrollment of resident students is assumed to continue at similar rates as today. It's much less than the projected 1,900 new housing units we project during that same time period, really because of decreasing student per housing unit ratios and the fact that about half of our new housing units will be multiple family, which generate fewer students than single family.
So would you describe the 25 students per year as not an aggressive assumption, but I guess that's an assumption or you're forecasting for with nothing aggressive. It's kind of a very moderate, I don't know if that's even the right word. Nothing, I guess, is aggressive in your assumptions there.
We don't project a range of enrollment. We try to hit the middle where we think things will actually happen based on housing unit growth and continuation of demographic trends. So that, I suppose, one thing, we always joke about regarding our projections is that they're going to be wrong.
Yep.
But I think that, they're going you can apply a range to that and, you are going to grow as a district. We're pretty confident about that. Whether you'll hit those 355 new students by 2035 or by 2032 or by 2038, I'm not sure.
Yep.
But that's the direction that I feel pretty confident on. We're not also incorporating in our projections any massive downturn in the economy like we had in 2008. If that were to happen, things could be postponed 3-4 years as they were because no housing was being built. Folks were feeling a little bit uneasy, so they weren't having as many kids. We're pretty much staying where they were. So were that to happen, that would be extended out. Conversely, if we had a new development proposal, Chicago area builder or Twin Cities that we're actually experiencing in Dane County where we live come on in and start building homes at a very fast rate, that number could happen sooner. So, predicting the future, especially our future in our world, is very hazardous. But I think the fundamentals, as we've kind of talked about today, are sound in the district for this type of growth.
So that 25 students per year, or resident students per year, the increase of 355 by 2035, we're saying that's kind of kids living in Mukwonago and attending Mukwonago schools, correct?
Correct.
Got it.
Neat. You bet.
All right, thank you.
There we go. So this is another map that shows just total 4K to 12 enrollment projections, really with that concentration, that darker color that you see on the map in that northern tier of the village of Mukwonago. Looking specifically at elementary schools, again with sixth graders still remaining in elementary schools, we project a 326 resident 4K to 6 student enrollment increase with resident enrollment overall projected to remain below elementary school capacity through 2035 with, again, only MASD resident students. But we know we have about 320 students that live outside of the district that open enroll into the district that are in grades 4K to 6. So when we factor those students in, we would experience capacity issues at our elementary school level by 2035.
Sean, what is your opinion Professional opinion on open enrollments in the next 10 years? The same, more?
I'm confident that it's not gonna diminish,
Yeah.
that definitely the same, possibly a little more, but I don't see it changing,
Okay.
not
Thank you.
not significantly.
There's a few different reasons why we typically don't project open enrollment. One of them is as enrollment starts to approach building capacity, your ability to accept open enrollment in students
Yep.
decreases. So it would have to be based on assumption that you would continue to build to enable that open enrollment in number to stay at that level.
And here's a graph showing that, what I just went over. So resident enrollment is that solid black line that we see, grades 4K to 6 still remaining below the combined elementary school capacities. But then when you factor in those 320 open enroll in students, for grades 4K to 6, we exceed capacity by 2035. Looking at specific elementary schools, so not including open enroll in students, and using our current elementary attendance areas and assuming no other changes, we do project that Clarendon Avenue Elementary will be just slightly exceed capacity by 2030 and be over capacity by 2035. Section Elementary School would also approach its capacity by 2035. Big Bend would soon follow after. And then Prairie View and Rolling Hills would remain well below capacity through 2035.
Is that to say, I guess more or less a solution to that would be to consider our school attendance boundaries to balance that up?
Correct. Yep, and our neighborhoods would act as puzzle pieces almost, where you could shift different neighborhoods around to get your elementary schools more balanced and be under capacity. This is a table from our report, also showing just resident student enrollment projections, where we see Clarendon Avenue Elementary exceed capacity by 2030, and then Section Elementary School just slightly under capacity by 2035. In the corresponding map, showing a lot of that 4K to 6 enrollment is concentrated in the northern part of the village of Mukwonago. That's going to be a recurring theme, not surprisingly.
How do you guys define capacity?
That's actually done something more or less locally by us. We have a certain number of kids per grade level. You know, if it's, I don't know, 20 at 5K and up to 28 in sixth grade, then we count the number of available classrooms and we just multiply that all out. And we develop that number more or less on our own,
Okay,
based on board policy largely.
sure, because, you know, as this suggests that we do have capacity, but it seems like, you know, the raw data may say that we've got capacity, but as we went through every school, they are
Well-
crammed in there and using every corner for any kind of special service that's available.
The capacity varies by classroom. Like you might have room for 50 kids, but you only got room for 5 kids in 5K, none in first grade or second grade. It varies. So
Right,
it's
and so when we talk about capacity, this is just total.
total head
we fit
counts.
This
Yeah.
many head count in the building, not necessarily where we fit them and
Yeah.
how. Okay,
And what we cut out to make sure they fit,
right,
like all conference rooms ever.
right.
That seem to not be in existence, or band or orchestra space, or, we saw capacity. It was
Yeah.
tight, yeah.
So here, this slide goes over our projections with resident students, but then also including those open enroll-in students. So if we were to assume that continuation of current levels of open enroll-in of those non-resident students into our schools, Clarendon Avenue Elementary would actually exceed capacity by 2025, be about 70 students over capacity by 2035. Section would exceed capacity by 2030, be about 50 students over capacity by 35. And then Big Bend Elementary would exceed its capacity in 2035 by about 30 students. We also project that Prairie View and Rolling Hills would still remain below capacity through 2035, even with those open enroll-in students at those schools.
Would they be okay? Will they be close?
I think this next, yeah, here we go. So this slide shows those 3 schools that will exceed capacity: Clarendon Avenue by 2025, Section by 2030, and Big Bend by 2035, with those open enroll-in students factored in as well. And then here is Prairie View and Rolling Hills. So Rolling Hills does get close, but then by about 2025, but then has decreasing enrollment, slightly decreasing enrollment after. And then Prairie View is just slightly increasing through our projection period, but they're still below capacity.
That's correlating pretty closely to where we're seeing housing unit growth projected and where we're not. And where we see, you know, aging of housing units happening and new people coming in, or conversely, some new housing units with a lot of kids today, and the folks just sticking around throughout our projection period as their kids age out of school.
I will add though, like Joel, you said, when you tour the schools, you realize there's no room now.
Yeah.
I mean, and the projections almost make it look like we have plenty of room, but we really don't, right? I mean, that was our opinion by touring the schools.
Completely agree.
Okay.
Looking at the middle school, so between 2021 and 35, we project about a 50 resident grade 7 to 8 student enrollment increase, with overall that grade 7 to 8 resident enrollment projected to remain below middle school capacity. And then including those 80 students open enrolling in grades 7 to 8, we see that our projections still have the building remaining below capacity through 2035 with those open enrolling students. And here's that graph for the middle school. So showing the capacity just shy of 1,000 at the middle school with almost 700 students in 2035 and about 775 with the open enroll in that red hashed line. And the 7 and 8 enrollment projections map. Looking at high school, grades 9 through 12, we actually project a slight decrease of grade 9 through 12 resident students by 2035, a decrease of about 21 students, with Mukwonago High School projected to remain under its capacity for resident students, and then also still projected to remain under capacity when you include the 200 or so open enroll in high school students. And you're probably asking, why are you projecting a high school decrease? The current high school class sizes are about 20% larger, so each class is about 60 students larger than current elementary class sizes. And that's something that we see in several districts we've worked with and see across the state. There were a lot of births in the state of Wisconsin in the 2000s. So those are the students that are now in high school. And they're just being replaced by smaller birth years and then smaller class sizes in the 2010s. Also, our new homeowner survey, most of the responses that we got back said that they had children in these new homes, but they were 0 to 4 aged or they were elementary school aged. There were a couple middle school responses, and then I think only 1 or 2 responses that had students at the Mukwonago area high school.
So when people move here, I guess more or less, and they're building a house, they typically are bringing younger children, not older children. Is that a fair
Correct. Yep.
statement?
Or they haven't yet had children and they're contemplating, or they'll never have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, yeah, we've seen across a lot of districts as families just don't typically want to move to a new district when they have a high schooler that's going to end, graduate in 2 more years. They likely just want to finish up their kid at that school and then they can graduate and then they'll move elsewhere. This is also where we have that pandemic effect coming in. The children born in last year, 2021, will be freshmen in the 2035 academic year. So we do have that class size a little bit smaller than it otherwise would be due to the pandemic and decreasing numbers of births. In the graph showing our enrollment projections with the resident enrollment in black and then factoring in open enroll in with that red hashed line, remaining below capacity through the projection period. And the 9 through 12 enrollment projections map showing, again, increasing enrollment in grades 9 through 12 in the northern part of the village of Mukwonago, with decreases elsewhere, specifically in some of the more rural neighborhoods. All right, looking at our enrollment projections, but under our different grade group configurations. So this is our what-if scenario with the 6th grade shifting to the middle school. So shifting those 6th graders to the middle school would appear to resolve those projected elementary school capacity issues for with residents, but then also with those open enroll in elementary school students. With those additional students, projected elementary enrollment for grades 4K to 5 would remain below combined capacity through 2035 for the elementary schools. But that sixth grade shift would result in capacity issues at Parkview Middle School immediately with both resident and open enroll-in students, and then by 2025 with only resident students.
So the only way to accommodate that was to make Parkview Middle School bigger, to move sixth graders out. That would alleviate elementaries, but to alleviate the burden at the middle school, there would need to be more space to assume those kids as those sixth graders.
Correct. This is a graph showing grade 4K to 5, so again, sixth graders at the middle school, so they're out of the elementary school. So these are elementary projections to capacity with only 4K to 5 students, showing that even with those open enroll-in students, enrollment is still well below combined elementary school capacity.
The 2021 number is 4K to 6, though, on this.
It is, correct, yep. And then grades 6 to 8. So that 2021 number is grades 7 to 8. So that's the current grade 7 to 8 students at Parkview Middle School. And then the 23, 25, 30, and 35 numbers are for our projected grades 6 to 8 students. So factoring an open enroll in, we see capacity issues immediately once sixth graders are moved to the middle school.
That's not a shocker.
Mhm. And wrapping things up here, so we project an increase from about 4,400 resident students today to about 4,750 resident students in 2035, an 8% increase, so about a 350 student increase. That projected increase, most of them are going to be new elementary school students in grades 4K to 6, about 325 of those, and then 50 more middle school, grade 7 to 8 students, and about 25 fewer high school, grade 9 through 12 resident students. Looking at our projection to capacity comparisons, so the district has adequate capacity in elementary schools to accommodate projected 4K to 6 students through 2035, but with resident students only, including those 320 open enroll-in students for grades 4K to 6. There's capacity issues at the elementary schools by 2035. The district currently has adequate capacity at middle and high school levels to accommodate projected 7 to 8 and 9 through 12 grade students through 2035, even including the open enroll-in students for those grades. But shifting those sixth grade students to Parkview Middle results in a resolution of the elementary school capacity issues, but immediate middle school capacity issues. Under a no-change scenario, capacity issues will present themselves at Clarendon Avenue by 2030 with resident students, by 2025, so in the next few years with open enroll-in students. With only resident students, all the other elementary schools are just under capacity by 2035, with Section Elementary just shy of it by 2035. And then open enroll-in students, capacity issues arise at Section Elementary by 2030, and then Big Bend by 2035. And then we project, even with open enroll-in students, Prairie View and Rolling Hills will remain under capacity through 2035. So the district could shift elementary school attendance areas sometime over the next few years into the mid-2020s in anticipation of projected capacity issues if sixth graders were to remain at the
Sean, you want to do that real quick before you go?
Mhm.
So I've done that in the past, and it's a blast, so I'm happy to lead that effort.
We've done it too. It is a lot of fun.
Mhm. And then, as I mentioned, with that sixth grade shift scenario, resident and elementary enrollment would remain below elementary capacity, and then even including those elementary open enroll-in students, elementary enrollment would remain below capacity through 2035. But immediate issues would come at the Parkview Middle School with those sixth graders.
The other thing with that is that keeping sixth grade where it's at means there's no room for 4K.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a good point. We just assumed that the district's current situation with having 4K at now 2 schools,
Prairie
I
View,
bel-
Big Bend.
It's soon to be at
soon to
Big
be
Bend.
2,
Yep.
would continue as is
Mhm.
throughout the projection period. In other words, that most of the 4K students would continue to be at private community partner sites. Were that to change, yeah, that would be a scenario C that we didn't run.
And that concludes our findings and our projections for you all. And be happy to entertain any comments and questions now.
What does, you've done this work for a number of districts. How do we, I guess, could you just provide some general comments about how we compare to other districts that you've looked at? Are we, I mean, I think it's safe to say a lot of districts have declining enrollment. That's a statewide trend because of declining birth rates. We seem to be bucking that trend to some extent. That's giving us the we're looking at growth here. So I guess can you just kind of talk aloud how we compare to other similar communities that you've worked on and looked at?
I can start, Nick, and you can fill in if you like. Well, we've worked recently for the Muskego district and for Mequon, Burlington on an attendance area change, Waterford. Yeah. And what you're experiencing here is fairly typical of what we're projecting for those other school districts around the Milwaukee area, moderate growth. There are some more explosive growth districts that we do work for in Madison and the Fox Valley area. I wouldn't want to characterize who we work for as maybe typical, because we often work for districts that are like, we're kind of growing and we think we might be growing a lot more in the future. We'd like you to come in to assess that for us. But it is definitely correct that the majority of school districts statewide are declining enrollment, and that includes rural districts and urban school districts and sort of first-ring districts. We also work for the West Milwaukee district recently, and they're declining in enrollment. So that's a fairly common characteristic, and statewide public school enrollment is down. You know, it's got nothing to do with public schools per se. It's got to do with the fact that people are just having less kids than they did. Our birth rate in our country has never been lower. The rate of births have never been lower in this country. And there's not much to suggest that that's going to change in a radical way as we look forward over the next 15 years.
The growth that you're projecting here for us is largely dependent, it seems to be, in the St. James potential development there, north of the high school in the Fairwind subdivision, west of the high school in the Miners Homestead subdivision, and then the apartment build out south of the expressway. So those four in particular are that's where the attention goes, or the explanation would go to why the growth. If there were more, in addition to that, if there were other larger developments that commenced, then this would only suggest even more growth then, correct? I know, and I think you said it, there's a lot of farm fields here for now. This is going back to when we visited Big Bend in July. And there are some, I mean, potential areas that could, you know, maybe they stay as farms, maybe they don't.
Yeah, there's plenty of capacity for new development in your district beyond what we're projecting. But we have to keep in mind that there's just only so many people, you know, in our region to fill that, you know, capacity. So, you know, again, yeah, you definitely could grow more. You definitely will grow more after 2035. But, you know, there are constraints on how much development, you know, will happen between now and then. So we side with your enthusiasm. There are things that are, you know, sometimes beyond your control, and the market is, you know, that one big thing that's beyond your control, and people's, you know, proclivity to have kids or not.
It does seem like, and Mark, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think in the Milwaukee area, it seems like the, you know, Tosa and West Dallas were like the growth areas in the 50s and 60s, and it was the city of Waukesha, Pewaukee more in maybe the 80s, 90s. You guys are almost on the next kind of fringe or the next frontier of development in the Milwaukee area, is what it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you've got jobs in Mukwonago for sure, but you know, the jobs also in the Milwaukee area are creeping towards you, and it's easier to commute from, you know, Franklin, where you and I grew up, to have a job at Harley and work here or wherever.
Or work from home.
Or work from home. That's a very good point, Nick.
Oh, it's Joel here.
Sherry.
I would be interested in listening to before things
Sean,
The
Sean,
options.
would you give Sherry the microphone? Thank
Yeah,
you.
I don't have, I would be interested, oops, in the 4K numbers, option C, in other words, because this discussion is being held in the Learning Committee and other places, so I don't think we can not have it in the information packet when we're deciding.
Well, would we be able to kind of infer those numbers based on the full final in-depth report you're gonna send us?
We projected 4K enrollment for each neighborhood.
We did.
You did, okay.
Let's-
So, you know, if it wouldn't be a hard effort on our part to assign them to their home school, if all of them were to attend their home school.
It wouldn't take long at all.
We are very similar, and I just had this conversation last week with my counterpart at Muskego. We're really similar to Muskego in a lot of different ways. The count of students, the demographics of our people, the property values, district-wide in the aggregate. We both of our districts, we have about in the range of 300 students at the 5K level. And then when you back up 1 year before that, about 200 of those students attend 4K. So currently our stride and their stride right now is you have 2/3 of 5K students will participate as 4K students. So that's been our story, that's been their story. So I think there's a little bit of a trend there for sure as far as that goes. So when we think about 4K, that's how I'm thinking right now. We can kind of project that and have a good view of what that looks like.
Yeah, and as you look at your enrollment projections, and if you typically, especially if you assume open enrollment in at a similar level, you're not going to have room to bring more 4Kers in. It's only with a solution that involves building that you would be able to think about or talk about bringing 4K completely into your schools.
Andy, did you have a question there?
I think he had touched base on it, but just to confirm that we are looking at growth of industry, because there are additional industrial parks coming, mostly in Mukwonago, but that could add additional homes as well.
And that's why we're seeing the proposals for 500-plus multiple family units, is most of those jobs are not paying a ton of money, and are, you know, therefore pushing the market for multiple family housing, where you don't have to have a down payment and to make it happen. So we certainly, as part of our work, as we talked to the municipal planners and looked at the area, we looked at the economics, you know, first, not just, you know, how many houses we thought would be built as a first step.
Well, we've been anxiously awaiting this, so I do thank you as we think ahead. It is helpful information, and I appreciate all the work you put into it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate your help here, guys.
You bet.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
I just saw that Waukesha closed a school. You know, I get it. That was quite the emotional situation for, you know, I'm very happy that we don't have that situation at all, you know, but again, I get it, you know, why that happened.
It's very hard. We just finished working for the Davenport, Iowa School District, and had to share with them last week that we project that they'll have between 2,600 and 3,800 extra elementary school seats by 2031. So that's multiple school buildings closing for them. And that's urban, you know, Midwest. I'm finishing with the Reedsburg School District, rural, you know, US, northwest of Madison by about an hour. And they're anticipating closing 2 rural elementary schools. Different setting completely, but similar issues.
This is a better challenge
Yes.
to have than declining
Yeah.
enrollment.
Yeah, no
closing
doubt, no
schools.
It's
doubt.
not fun.
No,
Not fun.
no.
All right, building grounds budget?
Oh, yes. So Andy's here, and Andy and I will kind of tag team this one here together. So we are looking to get action from the proposal from the committee to recommend to the school board that we adopt the budget that we're presenting here tonight. So I'll summarize at high level. If there's any questions, Andy's certainly the guy to answer it. Our budget that we have here for buildings and grounds is really in three parts. So we have an operating budget, a utility budget, and then a capital project, the one-time big projects budget. So the operating budget, we're proposing to keep even at $1.15 million. We put $500,000 into Fund 10, and then we put $650,000 into Fund 41. There only expenses that go into Fund 41 can only go in there if they're eligible. So those are costs that are preserving the life of a building, or there's some type of maintenance component. It's extending the life. So Fund 10, you can think of that stuff as custodial supplies in some instances. Buying paper towels for the bathrooms isn't really extending the life of the school, but that's why we have it carved out that way. So we've kind of hit a long-term stride of needing $500,000 in Fund 10 for operating costs, and then $650,000 in Fund 41. For the utility budget, we're looking to keep that at $1,065,000. Again, there's no increase that we're proposing there. We've held the line on that for a number of years now. So we're looking to keep the utility budget flat. In years past, we've had some budget surplus. Energy costs are going up right now. We all know that. So we don't anticipate any issues now or in the future, even if prices hold as they are. So we're positioned to handle that without saying, energy prices are up. What do we need to cut to afford these increased prices? So we feel good about the energy, the utilities budget as is going into next year at this number. So there's no increase there for the utilities budget. Finally then, for the capital projects budget, in Fund 41, we're looking at a $750,000 project at Rolling Hills Elementary for a new parking lot and asphalt. Andy, do you want to talk about that, and why that project is due right now?
Yeah, so that facility was built in 2000. We've done crack filling, we've done patch repair and such on that lot. It's deteriorating. We've had some areas that are sinking down a little bit by the front. So it's time to do some increased repair work on it, and really it's to the point, I think, just replacing it. I am looking at one other solution besides just putting in new asphalt, and that is a concrete overlay. So I had a company out this afternoon. This could be a cost savings that would bring the price down considerably, as well as extend the life of it if we go to concrete versus asphalt. So that is an option we're looking at. That would be the first school in the district that we have done that with.
You wouldn't have to, Andy, you wouldn't have to tear up the...
Wouldn't have to tear anything up. The different look of that would be that if you can imagine the bus lane at Rolling Hills, and you have the curbs on both sides for the median and the sidewalk, that it would all be flush. So we would have to be a little creative with like parking lanes and stuff like that. We did look at, could that even increase us some different parking areas and such, but yeah, it was really, we wouldn't be tearing anything out at that point, and we would just be putting concrete down. So obviously that is a budget number, and I'm looking to fall way below that if I can.
The last capital projects budgets that we have there are so that was a Fund 41 expense. And just to give you an idea, I'm not going to go into the tertiary aid explanation of this, but that there is.
He wants to.
I do. Absolutely. When you pay for something in Fund 10, 100% of those costs are going to hit shared costs. Okay. When it's in Fund 41, if you have $1 million in expenses, that whole $1 million will not apply to shared cost. You divide that $1 million by the number of years that you've had a Fund 41 levy. So it's been like about 15 years that we've had a levy into Fund 41. We take that $1 million, we divide it by 15. We recognize 1/15 of it now, 1/15 of that the next year. So you kind of take current costs, you recognize a small piece of it now, and you defer the rest into the future. And that's Fund 41 allows you to minimize your tertiary exposure. okay? If you are a positively aided school district, again, tertiary aid totally depends on property values and number of students. If you're positively aided at the tertiary level, meaning every dollar you spend ultimately decreases next year's tax levy, never use Fund 41. You just recognize every single cost you can right now. Don't defer any cost into the future. Accept your costs now, increase your aid now, decrease your levy now. Fund 46, we take that, again, Fund 41, we get 10,000 in funding per student. On the front end of the school year, we can take some of that money and set it aside proactively for Fund 41. In Fund 46, at the back end of the school year, we say, do we have any surplus dollars available that we want to earmark for future building projects? So we'll likely do some of that this year. And then when we put that money into Fund 46, it goes through the shared cost formula and gets recognized. Even though we haven't spent it, it gets recognized that when you put money in to Fund 46, that it goes through the shared cost formula. And it kind of ultimately works like a prepaid gift card, I guess is the analogy that I'll use. If you spend out of Fund 46 and you say, well, will this have any impact on our tertiary? We're increasing cost. Will this, hurt our aid in any way? And the answer is no. It's already been recognized. That money is there to be used at any point with no impact on next year's equalization aid or tax levy. So in Fund 46, we've done a good job of setting money aside there. We have a balance in excess of $3 million. We're proposing 3 projects for the upcoming school year. First, I'll start with the second and third ones on this memo that I had prepared. The baseball fencing project, Andy Trudell talked about that last meeting. Andy has set money aside from last year's budget, and he'll set more aside from this year's budget. So that $75,000 those funds are going to be set aside from the athletic department's operating budget. So we're not looking for the school board to allocate any new dollars. Those dollars are already there for Andy to use. So we're just going to put that in as an expense line item for next year's budget, but $75,000 is for dollars already set aside. We have $150,000 for Clarendon's playground. Ms. Kaplan asked for this here, I think in January. She has, she'll have about $60,000, maybe $70,000 set aside for that amount by the end of this year. And then she's pledging to cover the rest out of the next 3 school year budgets. So if her budget's $100,000, she'll reduce that by $30,000 so that she can pay for that now. So that's ultimately not an increase of district expense. It's just a reallocation of what we give her in a little bit of an advanced manner there. The only true ask of existing Fund 46 funds is to resurface the track at Mukwonago High School. So that, I'm not sure, Andy, when was that last done?
93, I believe.
So it's really near the end of life here. It's getting to the point right now that if we delay further, we'll increase the cost because the underlying asphalt.
I'm sorry, it was closer to 2,000 because the base layer underneath the asphalt is just asphalt itself, and that's roughly 20 years old. But when we reassessed it with Kolkman, who is the company that I'm using to plan out the project, he had felt with the amount of cracks that we have on the current surface right now, we have a good base layer underneath. We will not need to rip that part out, so we'll just be putting a new track surface over the top.
But if we wait further,
Wait
a couple of
further,
years,
then
that
we
track
will end
surface, yeah.
We'll end up having to replace both. At that point, we'll be putting $200,000 into asphalt underneath plus a new track surface on the top.
So now is the good time to do this project, in other words. So these dollars won't be coming from, classroom budgets or anything we need moving forward. We've set money aside in years past, and this is an opportunity where I think we need to stay fiscally prudent and remain that way, and to use dollars that we've set aside. So that's the budget, really, more or less. The operating budget stays the same, the utility budget stays the same, and then we have 4 capital projects that we're looking for here for the upcoming school year.
So where I work, we're seeing natural gas, going up a lot.
Yes.
I mean.
So our natural gas is up currently right now. Our I would say not so much our consumption, but our rate. And so I can't give you a true dollar what that is, but we are up. Electric, we're up this year as well.
I found a couple reasons for that. Part of it's due to COVID and how we were programming our air handlers for the amount of time before and after school. It's really hurting us more after school right now because the longer we leave it on in the peak demand area, that's where we're getting the higher charge. So we'll be making some adjustments on that in the near future. We don't need to make quick adjustments right now because we can cover our budget or cover our utilities with our budget. So we want to make sure that we end out this year good with the COVID response that we put in place, I feel. So yeah, I hear you there, Joel.
Yeah, if you can hold it, great.
I think, you know, the budget's been built, but we, in years past, if we've had some utility budget amounts unused, we could have said, hey, let's drop the utility budget, allocate it somewhere else. But then we'd have problems going into next year where we need that money to come back. We set that amount, we leave that amount, we think it's a good amount, and it's prepared to handle situations like this. Now, that could certainly change if prices go up even more, but we feel good about it right now. So
So do you need action in this?
we need you to recommend to the school board to accept the proposed buildings and grounds
I'd
budget
like to
as
make a motion.
Second.
Okay, but I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you rolling anything over from last year for 10 and 41?
So Erica, we'll do that at the end of at the end of this school year when we get to, the fiscal year, ends June 30th. We get a 1-month lag in the month of July to transfer money into Fund 46. I do plan that we will do that.
To cover this discrepancy between your capital project of Fund 41 and the operating budget?
Which
Well, so that's my question. Are we rolling anything over in Fund 41? Because you're showing an operating budget of 650, but we have a capital budget there of 750.
yeah, so the total budget in Fund 41, when you add the operating Fund 41 and the one-time capital project in Fund 41 is $1.3 million.
Do we need to make a transfer to 41 in June?
We can't make a transfer
Can't
into
make it
Fund
into-
41, we can only increase the levy there.
So
The only way to put dollars into Fund 41 is through the tax levy at the beginning of the school year. I would say that it's important that we say when we get that 10,000 in funding per student, any dollar you put into Fund 41, you are taking out of classrooms. That at times is fiscally the correct thing to do. You do need to invest in your roofs and your buildings. You can't let your buildings deteriorate. Those are assets that belong to the community. So you have I believe you guys have a responsibility to maintain those buildings. But those dollars also compete, you know, for how much do you allocate towards the students' academic resources and those needs. Obviously very important, just as important, if not more. So we are going to levy $800,000 into Fund 41. We are going to take out 1.3 million. So there is a deficit there. Some years we levy more and put more in. Some years we levy less and take more out. This is an example of one of those years.
What was the question, Erica, exactly?
You used the word discrepancy, and now Tom's got high.
Yeah, for sure. I
And then
didn't,
he's like
didn't-
mentioning
No.
that deficit that I was.
No, I
trying
don't know
to
if it's
process.
deficit or discrepancy. I don't know what discrepancy you're referring to.
I was looking at Fund 41 incorrectly because I skipped page 2 and went straight to page 4. So I see where you have it listed correctly.
Okay.
Just trying to make you sweat a little bit.
So the
And
second.
he was,
we
and he
budget
was.
this without any we're budgeting without any sort of rollover. Is what
Correct.
I'm
We
thinking.
can,
We balance it.
in our current Fund 41 budget, you know, we have $1.8 million that we budgeted as expenses. It's likely going to come underneath that. So we're not going to use everything we're asking for. I would anticipate the same thing's going to occur here, where we have $750,000 set aside for Rolling Hills. We're saying like it's not going to exceed that. That's the permission you're
Correct.
giving us to use. We do this right now so Andy can go ahead and start to get bids and plan out his summer work because he really needs to get it done before August is
And
over.
then- Well, and then even too, the 650,
Yeah.
I mean, there'll be projects that next summer will come out of that 650 that I'll plan. Because currently I have about $180,000 worth of projects planned to try and get done before June of this year with money from this current 650, this year's budget.
I'd like to make a motion.
Everything there is for next year.
Yep, got it.
Sorry. Any discussion? Oh, that's your job. Sorry.
Vertsy's always trying to take over everybody's jobs. My goodness.
Any discussion?
I'm done.
I got one thing. I'm kidding.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the director's report.
Yeah, I copied some from Stephanie Blue here. I just thought I'd lump a few things together here and just deliver some information to you guys right now about the state of the budget for the current year budget. Gave you a bunch of exhibits, a bunch of expenses, but I'll just verbally summarize these for you right now. In terms of our current budget, we are 68% of the way into our school year. So we have 32% of our school days left. As a general rule of thumb, we'd expect 32% of our budget left. And right now, we are in good shape. I have no concerns about the current year budget. Projecting ahead with some other expenses, I don't see us going over. I think we'll have an opportunity at the end of the school year to do some decisions in terms of what would we like to do with the surplus. Would we like to make a transfer to Fund 46 and set those dollars aside to help next year's buildings and grounds things, or other ideas we might have here at the board level. So we're in good shape this year, feeling good about it. So that's the overall budget expenses, particularly in salaries and benefits. As you know, that's our biggest line item, salaries and benefits. 75% of all of our costs are going to be in Fund 10 and Fund 27, salaries and benefits. So we completed our 19th payroll last Friday, and I am projecting we are going to be 1.75% under budget in Fund 10, which 1.75% sounds, it's not a huge percent number, but it's $625,000 in terms of dollars, which when you say the dollar value, it's big. So I feel like there's going to be savings there, and then we'll be 5% under budget in Fund 27, mostly due to the fact that we post a number of paraprofessional instructional aid positions that simply go unfilled for a number of months. So position 1 might be open for now, then it fills up, and then position 2 and 3 open up. When you do the math over 12 months, it gives you a savings, and you budget the dollars so you can find people to do those jobs, but when you can't find people to do those jobs, you save money, which I don't think you're trying to save money in that particular way, but it does happen that way. So we'd be $625,000 under budget in Fund 10 and $400,000 under budget in Fund 27. So our budget is going to be in great shape, not going to go over. Lastly then, I just talk about our cash balance situation. I gave you a graph, if you take a look at that packet there, toward the last 2 graphs, just shows you our cash position month by month. We go, our low water mark for cash occurs in November and December. In January and February, we start to receive property tax revenues from the village of Mukwonago or the town of Mukwonago. All 11 municipalities forward us our share of property taxes. So then our cash position increases greatly following the collection of those tax revenues. But just showing us here as we closed our books for the month of January. It takes us about a month to close our books. So we'll close out February here shortly. But as of right now, January is the most recently completed month. But the point here is that we're in good shape. We had $4.5 million in our November cash position for Funds 10 and 27. You really have to marry those 2 funds together to look at your operating budget and where that's at. We have other funds that have a cash position, but in Fund 39, for example, that's the money we levy to pay off our long-term debt. We couldn't go take that money to do anything differently than the intended purpose. So those dollars are spoken for and they're done. Same thing with Fund 50, food service funds. Those funds are going to go towards food service. So we have other cash balances, but we can't, and we're not going to use those. In Fund 10 and 27, that's our operating budget. We had a $4.5 million cash position at our low water mark. So that is what I would say to the board is if there was a major project that we needed to undertake and you wanted to pay for it with your operating expense, with your operating budget, that's the absolute amount, greatest amount of money you could use. Anything greater than that, we would have times of the year where we would have to short-term borrow, take on a loan for 30 days or 90 days, pay that short-term interest cost. So whenever possible, we like to avoid that. But we do have funds available in fund balance in our cash position to afford certain things if needed, if you guys chose to take on projects of sorts. I don't report on all this information throughout the school year because it's just too premature to talk about expense projections in November. It's fluid. This time of year, I can bring this back to you each month real briefly and just talk about how the current budget is looking, but it looks great, and I don't see anything changing that. So that's the director's report. If you have any questions, I'll answer
I'd
that.
like to make a motion, we accept the director's report.
You have to take it.
And
I
Fund
gave it to ya.
19, and Fund 91, and Fund 84.
I hope you enjoy that, Craig.
We've been here a long time, it seems, I don't know why.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, thanks.